Now what happens is the following. The end of the first year, let's do it the following. Let's even start installment sales right now because it started at the settlement. You gave me $2 million. Is there any taxable event? Let's ask the question that way. Friday, you give me $2 million. I give you the keys and the deed to the property. Do we have a taxable event at that point? Do I have a taxable event? You're going to do my tax return. Do I have a taxable event? Yes, Amir.
So, in essence, it might be that the sale is not realized because there is no transfer of title, so you're still the owner.
But I'm going to give you the title on Friday. I'm giving you the keys. I'm out of it. If anything happens to the building, it's yours. It's not my building anymore. I have a mortgage for what you owe me to protect what you owe me, but that's it. I don't own the building. You own it. So I get $2 million on Friday. I don't own the building anymore. Do I have a taxable event? Yes. It's income. All right. How much of the $2 million? How much is my profit supposed to be?
In total?
Yes. 6. How much is my adjusted tax cost basis?
4.
And how much have I gotten?
2.
And how much of the $2 million is taxable? That's the question. That's the beginning of the calculation for an installment sale. Good question, isn't it? How much of the $2 million is taxable on Friday? All of it? None of it? Some of it. Those are the only 3 choices you've got. And I'm not giving you a D option of all the above, because that doesn't make any sense. Steve?
It'd be like 60%.
60% of it is what Steve says. That's an interesting idea. 60% of it, because that represents the what? The gross profit of the sale. If 6 million of 10 million is the profit, 60% is your gross profit. So that's a pretty good answer. Anybody else want to chime in on what the answer should be? How many people think it should be 0 because you haven't even recouped your adjusted tax cost basis? It would be nice, right? That's a pretty good. How many people think all of it should be profit? The first hours you get should be profit. Anybody think that? Okay, good. That's good. That's good. Even if it turns out you're wrong, I like your thinking that you don't think it, because that we don't want profit right now. We're trying to defer the income tax. That's what our goal is. And so, how many people agree with Steve that it should be 60%? Good. And you're right. That's exactly what the tax law says. So here's what happens then. On Friday, 60% of $2 million, or is that 1.2? Do I have the math right? 1.2 million. 1.2 million is taxable. And do I have the math right? Is that 60%? I don't trust myself anymore, I tell you. When it comes to mathematics, yes, 1.2. So of the 2 million on Friday that you give me, I have to recognize a gain on 1.2 million. I have to pay tax on 1.2 million. The 800,000 you gave me that I don't pick up as income, what happens with that? What is that? What is that 800,000? You gave me 2 million, yes.
That's a proportion of the cost basis.
That's a proportion to the cost basis. So that's great. That's exactly right. So now let's analyze the math. At the end of the day on Friday, how much do you still owe me? How much do you still owe me at the end of the day on Friday? 8 million. You still owe me 8. What's my adjusted tax cost basis now in the building at the end of the day on Friday? It was 4 million. Now it is 3.2. Exactly. Why? Because 800,000 of the 2 million you gave me was charged to my adjusted tax cost basis. That was considered a return of my basis, a return of my investment. 1.2 is profit I pay tax on. $800,000 is a return to my basis. So at the end of the day on Friday, you owe me 8, and my basis is 800,000. What's the well, it's 3.2. 800,000 less the original 4 million. So my basis is 3.2. If you paid me, let's look at why this works. When it comes to these kinds of problems, the best way to prove yourself is say, okay, does this make sense? What if you pay off the 8 million at the end of the day Sunday? come to me Sunday and say, here, I don't want your note. I want to pay it off right now. I just won the lottery. Here's your $8 million. What's my gain? If I'm saying my basis is now 3.2, so 8 million minus 3.2 is what? Is it, what? I forgot, I have to do the math. 8 million minus 3.2. You know, the fact that I have to do the math in front of you is not showing you that you should be good in your head. I'm not giving you this is not a good thing for me to show. I should do these math problems before I come to class. 4.8 is the difference. So now, if I say 4.8 of that payment is profit, how much did I recognize on Friday as profit? On the down payment, I recognize 1.2. 1.2 plus 4.8 is what? 6. How much was my total profit supposed to be? 6. So it proves that's right. And that's how an installment sale works. In fact, the illustration I just gave you was an installment sale. Because listen to this. This is kind of cool. This is one of those, again, trivia questions for accountants. That's the other thing we should start a list of. Trivia questions for accountants. Like nobody in the world cares about this, but we. The definition of an installment sale is a sale of an item where there is more than one what?
Payment.
Exactly, more than one payment. It may only be two. It's still an installment sale. So my real play in this little example would be the following. I might say the following. Before I give you that, let's finish this example out. And then I'll give you the planning technique. Let's finish the example out, and then I'll give you the real cool, what accountants do, planning techniques with their clients. To finish the example, if all we did is have the $1 million paid out once a year over the life of this installment note, what happens is at the end of the first year, I get $1 million, and I have to recognize of that $1 million, how much of it is profit? How much of that $1 million at the end of the first year is profit now? 60%. That's all it is. Every year of an installment sale, we calculate what was the original gross profit, and for every dollar we get of that installment sale until it's done, every dollar, that percentage, the gross profit percentage, is recognized for tax purposes. Yes?
So what happens to your 6% interest? Is that...
Okay, great question. Very good. I was going there, but great question. So let's go back. Let's say the reality is at the end of the first year I get $1 million plus I get interest. So let's analyze how that's taxed. Let's just say, for argument's sake, and I don't know if this is right, but let's just say the interest at the end of the first year is $100,000. Probably wrong, but let's just use the $100,000, make it easy. So at the end of the first year, we get $1.1 million. $1 million is for the principal of what's owed, and $100,000 is for interest income. So now let's analyze the tax effects. Of the $1 million, we just said you're going to recognize, we're going to use what percentage? Which represents what? The gross profit. That $1,600,000 will be a Section 1231 gain. That's what in this property. It was a Section 1231 property I'm using as an example, and I'll pay the appropriate tax for the Section 1231 gain. Don't forget, what are you supposed to say when you hear the word Section 1231 gain? That's right. You still have to do the look-back rule. Still have to do that. Nevertheless, when that's 600, that's what I recognize. What did I do with the other 400? Now, what did I do with the other 400 at that point? I do something with it. I reduce the basis from what was 3.2 million down to 2.8 in case they pay off the rest. I don't even have to remember that, though. Why? Because every time they pay me, my profit on that dollar every time they pay me is just the gross profit percentage. So if I just follow that through, I don't even have to worry about the basis at all. It's just always 60%, the original gross profit. Now, the question on the floor was, what about the interest? How is the interest affecting me tax-wise? What do I do with that? I collect $1.1 million. Of the $1.1 million, 600,000 is Section 1231 gain. 400,000 of it is what? Just a return of basis. 100,000 of his interest Interest what? Interest, do I pay tax on that? What kind of tax? Ordinary, correct. And depending on who I am, I might also have to pay the net investment income tax. I'd have to check the rules on that one. That one's got me at the moment. I'm not sure, but I would be checking the rules. I might be subject to the net investment income tax. It's interest. It is interest. And it's certainly ordinary rates, but it might be affected by the net investment income tax. The gain itself might be a net investment income tax also, depending on who I am. What context was this building sold in? Was I a businessman in the real estate world? Maybe it's not affected. Who sold it? I would have to look at the rules. I just know one thing. I got to check. Maybe that'll be an extra credit problem in January for you, everybody. January 2017. You're all going to be here next year, retaking this course. Just kidding. All right, so that's an installment sale. That's how it works. Now, listen to the planning, the cool planning that you can do with an installment sale. First of all, the cool planning is, what did we do? We deferred the tax on the $6 million gain. We've got a promissory note. In fact, we got a mortgage. But we don't have to pay tax on that until we collect. That's really cool. But I'll give you one that's even a little cooler than that, which is we say to somebody, and this actually happened last year. The deal was to sell property, and the settlement was scheduled to be in December before the end of the year. Before the end of the year to sell. The buyer, on the other hand, was scheduled to buy it in December, and that was cool too. But then, as things happen, and this wasn't an installment sale, by the way. This was not set up as an installment sale. The buyer was going out and getting a mortgage, and they were, and the seller was going to get all cash on the day of settlement. However, the bank took their good old time because in December things slow down. I'm not sure why. What happens near the end of December, I'm not sure what it is that causes banks to slow down, but I think you can figure it out. As you get closer to the end of the year, people start taking vacations, and they start holiday parties a little earlier and drinking. I mean, things just happen. So the settlement got pushed to January. And the buyer went ballistic because the buyer was expecting to get, for 2014, when they bought it in December, they were expecting to get something out of it. Can you remember what I once said about even when you buy bricks and mortar, what can you do? It was a cost segregation study. Do you remember the cost segregation study lecture we had? Divide up the property into the bits and pieces. Some of the bits and pieces are 3, 5, 7-year depreciable property. Some of that property gets immediate depreciation of a large amount. Even if it was mid-quarter, it was going to wipe out a lot of income that the buyer had in 2014. Just the depreciation on buying that property in 2014. My client is the seller, by the way. The buyer went ballistic. The buyer was threatening to walk out of the deal. I don't care if it's my fault or it's my bank. It's not my fault. It's my bank. My bank's not coming through. I'm walking away from the deal. This in the contract that said that the deal has to close in December. I don't want it. So my client, the seller, came crying. What are we going to do? I'm going to lose this deal. This property, maybe it'll sell to someone else for the same amount of money. Maybe it won't. Who knows? The market is fickle. This was in a resort area, and the market is fickle in resort areas in America today. Sometimes you can find a right buyer, and sometimes you don't. What am I going to do? So the response we gave to them is, we got an idea for you. You will create an installment sale out of this. True, you don't want to be the banker. You don't want to wait for your money. You can't afford to. But all we need to do is get an installment sale by doing the following. In December, we'll go to closing, and we'll call it a real closing, transfer of deed, give over the keys, but it'll be known as what's called a soft closing. In the vernacular of the real estate world, it's a soft closing, meaning no cash changes hands. No cash. Take $1. A soft closing. And on the books, You sold, they bought. You, my client, you don't have to pay tax in 2014 because you didn't get your money. It's an installment sale. And you're only going to get your money on the next go-round in January when the bank funds the mortgage. And then you'll recognize the profit then in the next year, 2015. And guess what, my client? That's good for you because your tax bracket will be a little different that year and you'll actually save taxes. Oh boy, my client jumps up and down. That's a great idea. All we had to do is convince the buyer to go to the soft closing, and that wasn't hard to do because the buyer has little or no risk. It's my client taking on the risk of advancing the funds in an installment sale. I'm not getting my money. You owe me. You owe me. In December we had the closing, and they basically were saying, you owe me the difference.